We are so excited today. We have Brehan Crawford, acupuncturist, herbalist, expert in Lyme disease, post viral illness, chronic pain, chronic infection, and owner of Crawford Wellness in McMinnville, Oregon. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me on the show.
So happy to have you here. It's so wonderful. So, what's lovely about this podcast is we get to dive deep into everything that has to do with guts. Brian has been studying the guts for quite some time, and it's a huge part of his practice.
Very
And
much
so,
so.
we were hoping today to dive in a little deeper and kind of talk a little bit about the Chinese medicine part of the ways in which we approach the gut. So, if you would like to just kind of take the floor and tell us a little bit about your approach and how Chinese medicine, looks at the gut and approaches digestion and how we, multifaceted ways in which we engage all the different organs and create some healing.
I'm happy to do that. Thank you. Yeah. So Chinese medicine has been focused on gut health for a very long time. As you know, it's one of those systems of medicine that people will call it holistic because it's one of the original forms of what's now often referred to as functional medicine. It's where you're looking at different functions of the body, and when they all are working well, people tend to be healthy and vital and happy and living a great life. And when you have functions of the body that are not optimal, whether it's sleep or endocrine function or digestion, quality of life suffers and you're more vulnerable to infection, or you don't recover well from injury, or you start to develop, chronic diseases, autoimmune conditions, things of that nature. So we've been talking about gut health in Chinese medicine for 5,000 years. And there's just, it plays like Hippocrates said, he was obviously not Chinese, but, famous Greek physician, one of the original founders of what has evolved into Western medicine of this day. All disease starts in the gut. And Chinese medicine has always said basically the same thing. Whether it starts there or not, the gut plays a huge role in every kind of chronic illness. We classify different organ systems of the body according to patterns in nature that we find. And this is classically described as the 5-element system. I don't know if you guys have ever talked about that or tried to discuss it with your audience, but the gut is famously associated with the earth element. So it is soil. It is what makes the flesh of our body, just as the earth is the firmament, the stuff we can touch. And the quality of our guts, the quality of our digestive system is very closely linked to, or described as, cultivating a healthy garden. So when we look at this under the microscope in the modern era, we see, the role of the microbiome, the role of millions, trillions of microorganisms collectively playing a role to build our health from the ground up. And when we look at it from the perspective of cultivating a healthy garden, of tilling soil, of nurturing the soil, whether it's nutrients or proper aeration or things like that, and then it becomes a fertile garden with a diverse array of crops that bring, it's like you walk in somebody's lovely garden, it makes you feel happy and relaxed all the time. Your tummy should be the same way.
Yes. Yes. I love that about the spleen and stomach. So, what can go wrong in kind of modern day when we're starting to ingest all the normal foods that are in front of us? And, what kind of starts happening with our fertile garden?
A lot starts happening. That's not great stuff. So for starters, the modern diet gets a bad rap, and for good cause. IBS affects, I think it's something like 30% of the American population. It's up close to 100 million people and are qualify for that diagnosis. And that can mean a lot of different things in terms of like troubles at the toilet, abdominal discomfort, constant bloating, fatigue after meals, brain fog, food sensitivities, all of that. And what we see both from the classical Chinese medicine perspective and the modern perspective biochemically is that a lot of what we eat is lacking in nutrients. Specifically, fiber is really one of the most important things that people don't get enough of. And then it's often laden with stuff that we don't really need, like excess oils, salts, carbohydrates, and sugars, things like that. And the processed food, ultra processed food especially, is developed to make you want more of it, right? It's like it's palatable, super appetizing. Like you eat, even like Lay's potato chips, their motto used to, I don't know if it still is, but it used to be, you can't eat just one. Like you can't, you, they're telling you right from the beginning, you can't snack on this. You're gonna binge and you're gonna regret it. And in small amounts, in moderation, our bodies are very resilient against these things, and we've adapted to eating a very diverse array of foods, especially in different climate regions around the planet at different times in history, depending on what's available. People can thrive in those situations, but when you get too far out of with that, and that's always within reason. And then when you get too far out of balance with anything, you start to develop gut problems from the inside out. And they often develop with people slowly over time. And then for many of my patients, what I hear about is that, they always had a little bit of bloating. They always were like, I shouldn't eat too much cheese. I shouldn't have more than 2 drinks on a weekend. Like very normal stuff. Like nobody should be doing, no one should be eating pizza 3 meals a day. But then once in a while, like, yeah, you have some birthday cake or you go to a barbecue, no big deal. But then they get an infection or they go through a traumatic event or a period of their life where they're just under a constant amount of elevated stress. And these is kind of like a catalyzing event or series of events that occur. And whether it's foodborne illness is often a catalyzer for IBS, it becomes permanent after that. And so we know like we're fragile, we're resilient to a degree, but there's often a straw that breaks the camel's back. And then from that point on, people are really struggling, and they often go down the rabbit hole of eating a more and more restrictive diet because they have so many sensitive foods that they just can't, that'll set them off. Or they start trying fad diets just to try anything, just to, fix the gut in a way that they feel like then they can start to reintroduce things. And they can't, they
Right.
end up eating a more and more restrictive diet over time. You get the psychological effects of that, of not being able to eat in a community setting, which we know like people who eat with friends are happier and
Yeah.
healthier, period. Isolation is not good for life. It's like
Mhm.
we thrive in diverse environments, just like our flora. And the study of the microbiome in the modern era is a rapidly evolving field. There's more about it that we don't know than what we do. But one of the few things that scientifically we know about the microbiome that is pretty much set in stone now is that the more diverse it is, the healthier the individual. So there are certain flora that we consider good or pathogenic, and oftentimes it's about a balance. Like lactobacillus and bifidobacter are the good bugs. Things like candida yeast, or on a very extreme end, Clostridium difficile, C. diff, like you can see, people who get hospitalized for that infection are bad bugs. Although we're all carrying those all the time, and
Mhm.
they're supposed to kind of exist in this harmonious soup. But the only thing we know is that as people age, our microbiomes tend to become more and less diverse. After antibiotics, after infections, after surgery often, which, of course, they give you antibiotics during surgery preventatively, our microbiomes become less and less diverse. And so the promoting a very diverse array of flora in a healthy balance is really where health originates from.
And
Ah.
it's also important to note too that a lot of times the same bacteria, when they're in your colon, which is where we want the majority of our bacteria to
Yes.
be, is they're migrating up, or they're taking up residence in that
Yeah.
small intestine where the food's in bigger pieces and it's
Yep.
reacting with them, and then that
Yep.
causes a whole other set of symptoms, right?
Yes, the location is critical. They can't be in the wrong place. H. pylori is a good example of that.
Great example.
We're supposed to have some, and in fact, there are studies showing that when you treat children with antibiotics for H. pylori, their rates of allergic asthma go up dramatically. Which
Yeah.
in Chinese medicine, antibiotics are considered. We talk about a lot about the thermal nature of foods and medicines, whether hot or cold foods, and it's easy to overthink it, but like you don't have to. It's like hot stuff is like ginger and chili peppers and chai tea, things that are spicy, generally speaking, and cold things are green tea, matcha. It's something like you eat it, it's cooling.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Antibiotics have a very cooling effect on people. It's a very cold kind of a medicine, cold therapy, and asthma is often a cold condition. And so when certain parts of your body are supposed to be warm or cool, moist, or dry. And when you use a medicine inappropriately, that can, affect the microbiome of the body, of the GI system especially, you can have systemic effects from that and, trigger
Mm.
more problems afterwards.
Yeah, it's like when your garden, if we can bring it back to the garden metaphor, it's really cold outside. And a
Yeah.
lot of that bacteria in the soil might die. It's too
Yep.
cold.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep.
And also, it might be spring and it's in Oregon. So you're living in a wet sock and you are trying so hard to like
Yeah.
keep things not, damp. And that's one thing I thought that might be kind of fun to talk about today is this concept of dampness. I just really appreciate the way you present our medicine. And I think it's so beautiful. And
Thanks.
dampness, I think, is very prevalent because of the type of processed food that we lean on a lot in life and how delicious it is and things.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
was wondering if you could speak to dampness.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the garden example is a great place to come from for this because, like you were saying, yeah, it's cold right now. It's very damp outside in Oregon. We're in Oregon. It's cold and wet. You don't want to be outside barefoot. Nobody's feeling good with that.
Right.
I'm working in my garden room this weekend, just building new beds and digging up the soil and stuff, getting ready for planting season coming here pretty soon. And what you find is that there are less flora. There's a lot less activity than what you would normally see. You're not finding the earthworms crawling around. The compost heap, if you don't turn it, it stops steaming, right? Like it's creating its own heat, but you gotta aerate it. You gotta give it a little bit of, those bacteria need some oxygen. They're aerobic. What you do see are fungus growing. And so as you dig into the soil, you find mycelium. It's just there. White, stringy stuff. You can see it in the clods of dirt you dig up from your garden beds. You can find it if you go dig anywhere in the ground right now. And it's the same in our digestive system. And so we have, just like it's cold and damp outside, we have flora that love a cold, and there are flora that grow in a cold and damp environment outside. Similar flora in our bodies prefer a colder and more moist environment, and that's often things like yeasts, which are fungal. And so when we talk about the phenomenon of dampness in Chinese medicine, it oftentimes correlates biochemically with, or biomedically with yeast overgrowth. Not always. There are also bacteria that love colder and damper climates that create a lot of biofilm, mucus. Like classically a sign of dampness is a very thick biofilm coating on the surface of the tongue. And so that's created by the flora of our intestines. It kind of comes up and coats the tongue a little bit. And in Chinese medicine, we're always looking at our patients' tongues. We want to see like, okay, what's the color of the tongue? That's going to indicate, blood supply to your musculature. It's going to indicate your body's thermal nature. If you're very pale, you might be cold, you might be anemic. If your tongue is like a bright crimson red color, you might have an elevated body temperature. You might be fighting a fever. The biofilm coating, if it's super thick, if it's very greasy, and even if it's changing colors, or it's showing in patches, what we call a geographic coat, that can indicate different kinds of bacterial or yeast overgrowth in the insides, and is commonly associated with illness, fatigue, brain fog. It's like you feel like you're living in pudding. That's why they call it dampness. It's not a fun place to be.
Yeah. And back in school, one of the things that was really nailed into us was dampness and digestion really just equals very wet, like difficult and incomplete stools.
Often, yeah.
Because there's just too much water in the soil.
Yeah. Yeah. They will often feel, we'll see two stool patterns with dampness most of the time. Either it's incomplete, really sticky stools. I like to use the term the poop marker for people. They'll it's like you just wipe and wipe and wipe. And it's like, it's never, when is it going to stop? When can you get clean? These are the people that really love the bidet, and which is a great invention, very helpful for that situation. But there's a whole market now of special wipes for that kind of thing too, that'll clean you faster. Or you see a lot of and that's very damp, sticky stool. That's your earth, your flora are just creating a lot of mucus. There's also the diarrhea type, and where people are just rushing to the toilet, just trying to get water out. Your body is trying to get excess water out as fast as it can. Both of those presentations are less than ideal for people.
And so what are some recommendations that you have for people who who are experiencing a lot of these symptoms.
So when, the kind of the blanket ones that we give out a lot for damp kinds of stool problems, for damp kinds of gut issues, are to eat a diet with more fiber. Again, most Americans are missing fiber. We generally recommend upwards of 30 grams a day. It's going to depend on your body size and what your caloric needs are, but that's a good starting place for most people. You got to ramp that up slowly, or they get really, really bloated if you just start, chugging psyllium seed husk or something like that, or eating a pound of broccoli every day. But then we also look at the types of foods that they're eating. And so when you see cold and damp kinds of conditions in someone's GI system, we want to give them warming and drying nutrition ideas. And those are often things like, of course, warm food. Not eating cold things, not eating frozen food. Just merely the action of warming the food up to body temperature takes a lot of energy from your body. And just like the recommendations for pain management when you have an injury have really changed in Western medicine as the evidence has caught up to tradition of applying cold. So if you have an injury to your body, a physical musculoskeletal injury, they used to say ice that, because it would stop the pain and it would control the inflammation. And it's true, it does do that. It dulls the nerves so you don't feel the pain, and it constricts blood vessels, and that slows the inflammatory process. But what they now know, and this is consistent with Chinese medicine tradition, is that it also slows the healing and recovery of that injury. And so you're more likely to develop arthritis in a joint that's been iced after acute injury versus if you apply gentle heat to it. Heat can have a nociceptive effect. It can dull pain a little bit, but it also promotes blood supply. And so it facilitates proper circulation of blood and nutrients and gases through the joint, and that's how we heal and recover. So we often don't think about it this way, but the guts, the inside of the lining of our digestive tract, is the outside of our body, right? Because topologically, from mouth to anus, we're shaped like a donut, and we've got a giant tube going through us. And, at the lips, that's the extension of your and the nose, that's the extension of your digestive tract onto your skin. And so the same things that help your skin are going to help your digestive system, same concepts anyway, like don't swallow lotion and sunscreen. But when you eat stuff that's super, super cold, it constricts blood vessels on the inside of your digestive tract. And it allows for, it creates reduced peristaltic activity, reduced squeezing and motility in your intestines as that, whatever it is that you ate or drank, is brought up to body temperature just through touch, just through being there. And so while that's happening, you're not getting as much immune function in the intestines. And then the critters, the microflora that prefer a colder and often more damp environment, because cold food is going to have a lot more moisture in it for the most part, unless you're eating like very cold freeze-dried stuff, which is weird. I don't know anybody who does that. You're promoting the growth of flora that are associated with dampness. And those are not really good things to have.
Yeah. And the nature and temperature of food, like when we think about cold, temperature for sure, like straight, like water, for example. People are always like, well, can I have cool water? And I'm like, well, in the summertime, a little bit cooler than your body is great because you're probably really warm.
Yeah.
But bringing in a freezing cold with ice is literally just going to slow down your digestion and have such a wasted amount of thermal heat that you have to do to warm up this water to make it the same temperature as your body so that it's usable. That's kind of a big waste.
Yeah, it is.
And the nature, in terms of, when I think about food, I wanted to just take this a little more simply too, in that the nature of food being like damp or dry. I love, when I think about clean, healthy foods, and I'm like, well, a lot of the time you can still eat a lot of the same foods. We just need to change how your body's going to assimilate them. So I love to bring up like a piece of slightly steamed broccoli as opposed to a piece of very raw broccoli.
Totally.
And just think about the energetic output and like how much digestion am I going to have to do for each of these? This slightly warm and most like a little bit broken down, but still really rich in nutrient piece of broccoli that's slightly steamed is going to be way easier for me than this completely raw piece of broccoli that has had no it's still holding all of its nutrients, but you're going to have to work a lot harder
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get all of those out of there. And when you are suffering from something like a chronic disorder, that's just not something you want to waste your time with. Like, put
No.
things in that are a lot easier to assimilate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to tell people they need to treat their digestive system oftentimes closer to that of a baby. You're
Mhm.
not going to give a baby raw broccoli. Like,
Right.
even if they have teeth and they're chewing, like you might, chew on a carrot coin or something like that. That's fine. Give them, if they're teething, it's great. But most of what you eat, and it's not that you can't ever have a salad either, but most of what you eat should be warm, should be cooked. You should need to chew it. Chewing's good for you too, but you should need to assist digestive function. Humans have been cooking food for at least 1,000,000 years. We have anthropological evidence going back that far, and it's not a fad. Like, it's true that raw food does contain more nutrients, but you don't absorb them. You just don't. You have to cook those to make them bioavailable, and yes, you lose a little bit, but like you don't get everything from eating raw food. So it doesn't really matter that the nutrient density is a little higher.
Well, and also,
Yeah.
if you're going to digest and absorb the cooked food better, then whatever you lose in cooking, at least you're absorbing a greater majority
Uh-huh.
of the nutrients versus
Absolutely.
Right. The
Yeah.
likelihood is a lot higher if you make
I
it
like
right.
I like to tell people if they don't feel, if they're afraid of jumping into a cold lake, like, that they shouldn't drink cold water. If it's a hot day
Ooh.
outside, if you feel like doing a cold plunge would be like, vigorous, therapeutic, like, so refreshing, and it's 90 degrees outside, and as soon as you get out, you're going to dry out and warm up. Great, go for it. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fun. Like, splash in lakes. Don't drink lake water. It's a great way to get parasites. But like, if you if it's 41 degrees and rainy outside and you're shivering and you go outside and you wish you had a scarf and a sweater and a hood on, not the right time to be drinking cold things.
And can we bring a little bit of concept of Jing in here as well?
Yeah,
Kind of in the
sure.
level of, chronic illnesses, and those people tend to present with a lot less vigorous, life force or Jing or
Mhm.
like base chi.
Mhm.
The same way that you would kind of like what you were just describing. Like, I don't have the ability to warm up from that. Like, I've
Yeah.
swam across the Columbia River probably 9 or 10 times for
Oh my
this cross
goodness.
channel swim that they do. It's so fun.
Good
Luckily,
for
I never
you.
ended up with parasites that I'm aware of. But it would take me a day or two to warm up. And I was post having, I was probably a year after I gave birth to my second child. So I feel like I was still kind of recovering, trying to build
Right.
up my
Yeah.
blood and my,
Sure.
I nursed them close together, whatever. And when we bring in that concept of Jing, like, that's your life force. This is what you've been given. It's your blueprint. It's your
Mhm.
blueprint of chi. Like, how's that going to unfold? What are the bumpers of health you're going to give your body to show it that we want to keep that as preserved as possible? And when
Yeah.
we think about the gut and kind of going back to the garden and the soil, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on, just our Jing.
So there's I separate these things out into what we call prenatal and postnatal. And so prenatal is Jing, like, that's what you were given. That's your genetics, right? Like, that's your potential that you inherited from all of your ancestors, most directly through your mother and father, through your sperm and egg donor. But you were given that at the beginning of your life. You're never going to get more of it. You're never going to get otherwise. Maybe stem cells could do that for us in the future. But if we're just talking with things that are available to most people now, once you have your Jing, that's all you get ever. And so there's a huge focus in Chinese medicine and in many forms of traditional medicine. They don't always talk about it the same way. They'll use different language to describe it, but on preserving what you can of that, because you're just, the only two truths in life are death and taxes. Everybody who's born will someday die. Like, we haven't figured out how to escape that yet. I think it's an entirely different podcast on whether or not we even should. But for all of us, like, listening and speaking today, we're going to die someday. The way that you push that off as far as you can, other than, general safety habits, wash your hands and all that, is to preserve your Jing, is to preserve your essence as much as possible. You do lose some every day. And certain things that you do that make you lose more are things like overworking, working to physical or mental exhaustion, are staying up, burning the midnight oil, especially if you're using artificial light during the yin time of the day, which is the night, during the dark time. It's like we're supposed to be, if you're staying up after sunset, to read, like maybe by candlelight, but or by incandescent dim light. But looking at a blue, LED screen for, until 1 a.m, that's a great way to lose your jing. And then for men, especially, overindulgence in sexual activity will make you lose jing very quickly. And so there's
specifically with ejaculation, I would say, just to interrupt there, because I think you can, if you're, we'll just use the term like getting close to, and you don't actually lose your like physical form of jing.
Yeah. Jing has a few different English translations, but one of them is semen for So men, there's certain Taoist practices in Qigong that are used to for seminal retention, but you can also just, I don't know what the kids call it these days, edging or whatever it is. I think there's
that's what they call it.
There's danger with that too. Like there is actually, because that's a kind of a, in that Qigong practice. I was not expecting to talk about this at all today. In that Qigong practice, you're taking that potential, that sexual energy, and you're circulating it, right? Because any kind of very vigorous energy that your body creates, you have to give it a place to go, or it causes disease. So if you don't circulate that, you end up with prostatitis. And so a lot of and I've seen patients who've done this, like, they'll read a book on sexual qigong, and then they'll only do the first step or the first two steps, one of which is like you giving yourself this intense acupressure on the perineum as you come closer to orgasm, and then when you have that phenomenon occur, then things just sit there. And sorry, there's UPS guys walking in right now. And then that physical pressure prevents ejaculation. And so, but if you hold that pressure there for too long, it just creates a lot of stagnation in that area. And I've seen patients who've done that for years and years and years. They develop prostatitis very quickly from it. So you actually, there is more to the practice than just not ejaculating, but that is part of it. And then there's also, in terms of prenatal, the genetic potential that you're given during your life, you are using some of that. You are also turning it into postnatal. So you're turning it into your digestive capacity. You're turning it into the way your autonomic nervous system functions, the way your immune system functions. And by doing that, by living a moderate life, eating healthy, getting exercise, sleeping well, all of that, you do naturally preserve a lot of jing. And, I don't want people to take this out of context either. Like, it is okay for men to ejaculate sometimes, but it's not.
That's not what we're saying.
I think that balance is so beautiful. That's why this medicine all stems from the yin and the yang. You have this sense of, yes, it's okay to preserve. It's okay to ejaculate, and at the same time, how did you feel afterwards? Like, how are you able to know? Like, are you so exhausted? You have no appetite, you're maybe a little lightheaded. That's not actually going to be a good practice for you to continue to eat, just see what works for you.
Right.
With the jing, I was curious about, I wanted to present that concept of, how, well, this was what we learned in school, was the big black cauldron, thick black cast iron cauldron of your digestion, where your jing is this beautiful, campfire underneath it. And you have the ability.
Sterno burner.
Exactly. And you get to moderately live, or indulge in things, or don't indulge in things, to be able to make, stoke up that fire, or literally pour water on it by eating an extremely damp diet.
Right. Yeah. Or exposing yourself to exogenous damp and cold. If if you're just, you put yourself, you go run around outside in your underwear when it's freezing cold, it doesn't do much for your libido or for your gut health.
Right.
Right.
Now,
Exactly. So
would would having diarrhea be something that would drain your jing in a
Yeah.
similar way?
Yeah, it can. Because
Interesting.
every time, this is how we naturally lose a little bit of jing through our life, is every time something leaves our body, you lose a little jing with it.
Okay.
And some of that is supposed to happen. Like
Mhm.
so the ways that jing, there's moving qi, which is something that is created out of jing in a certain way, is releasing a little bit. And so every time you breathe out, you're releasing some qi. Every time you breathe in, you're gaining some, but you never get back quite as much as you lose. Right? Every time you eat food or drink water, you get a little bit of qi and some yin. And every time you evacuate your bowels, you lose a little bit, and always just a little bit more than what you brought in. Uh, the so having too many bowel movements means you're going to be depleting your jing a lot.
yeah,
So
the
interesting.
water, the nutrients, you may not have
Mm-hmm.
had time. And I loved how you were describing that too, because it made me think a little more really micro too. When you come down to the bacteria, and the more diversity you have, the more yang nature you have in its interaction with the food that you're bringing in, but the more yin you gain in terms of your
Exactly.
jing and how much you're able to actually absorb,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is really cool. So if you are approaching, someone who has, we talk a lot about Crohn's and IBS on
Oh,
here.
okay.
Molly's been dealing with that, or been crushing it with her health for quite some time now.
Molly.
And yeah, the
My
good
life's
balance.
work.
Yes. And so I was hoping to maybe segue a little bit into a couple of things. I looked at a lot of your chorus formulas, and I know I was really happy to see that there was so much gentle food, actual herbs in there, which made me so happy. I was like, "Oh, good job! These are so great."
Yeah.
Um, and so I was thinking, if someone, we talk a lot about on here about how to get things from food, right? Like
Mhm.
we don't want to just supplement the heck out of people. We want
No.
food. And of course, there's a time and a place for both. And I love that yours kind of marries those together. So what's in these formulas that someone could maybe pick up with food if that was appropriate for them? Or can you help us dive into a little bit more about what you put into them, and maybe talk about what chorus your
Yeah.
line of supplements you created are?
There are so right now Chorus really has the one main formula that's available. It's just called Chorus capsules, and it's a 16 ingredients, and some of them are on the more medicinal side of the spectrum. Some of them are more on the food side of the spectrum, like medicinal foods. And so traditionally in Asian culture and Asian cuisine, you see a lot of these more medicinal foods being used either in climates where people are predisposed to dampness. Things like Job's tears, it's called koik seeds, and it's oftentimes called pearl barley. It's not actually a barley, but it is mislabeled that in the West very frequently. It is gluten free, and you can cook it like any other grain. You could cook it in broth or water. It's extremely bland, so it doesn't really have a taste all its own. But they'll mix it with other grains. They'll mix it with rice and millet and some nuts and seeds, maybe fruit or some vegetables or spices and things to give it some flavor. And it's incredibly high in resistant starch. So it just by its own nature is already, when you eat the cooked plant, it's already feeding your healthy flora, your lactobacillus and bifidobacter, which are what most people need to be nourishing more of from that resistant starch quality. It has a lot of beta glucans in it that are fantastic for gut health in many respects. Another one that is in chorus that's often eaten in Asian cuisine that is not really used much in the West is called poria mushroom. And so this is one that we talk about medicinal mushrooms in the West all the time. People are, taking huge amounts of lion's mane and cordyceps and reishi and turkey tail. And, those have their benefits. They're great. I don't really know why poria hasn't made it over here and
Mm,
become as popular.
I
It's
agree. So
so
good.
healthy. It's so healthy for you. It's amazing for what we call water metabolism. So it keeps water moving through your body very effectively. Uh, we Dampness has a lot to do with lymphatics circulation as well, and so or glymphatic circulation, which is how the brain cleans itself, is through that mechanism. It's a specific kind of the lymphatic system that's just in the brain. Poria mushroom activates these things called aquaporins, which are tiny little receptors that are in every cell we have that allow fluid to enter and exit the cell appropriately. So I learned in high school biology, it was all about electrolyte balance, and it does, like, there's the osmotic effect, sodium potassium pumps, things like that. That is real, but that's actually not how most water moves around our body cellularly. It moves through the interstitium, which is the space between cells, and that depends on aquaporin function. Poria mushroom is fantastic for helping that work appropriately. So if you're constantly bloated, waterlogged, swollen ankles and all that kind of stuff, like it has a mild diuretic function, but it's also very good for the gut. And then the last one that's in chorus that I really love is a ferment. It's called shenchu. And the English translation of that is often medicated leaven or fermented mass, or what do they call it? Also, the name's escaping me, but it's a ferment. It's made from grains, including wheat, like heirloom wheat gets in there, other grains as well, and then certain medicinal herbs. They're all kind of mashed together and made into a sourdough starter. And traditionally in Asia, this is used for IBS with a lot of diarrhea. It has a lot of the benefits of sourdough. So it has both prebiotic and probiotic actions in it. But what we have discovered in the modern era also is that it helps you to create a ton more amylase. So if people get really bloated from digesting starches, or they have a lot of people have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So celiac disease is, of course, an autoimmune reaction that's triggered by ingesting gluten. We can't fix that. But non-celiac gluten sensitivity responds. I have to say, I was shocked to see this. I had to try it myself first. I was very sensitive to gluten for many years, had to avoid it religiously or I'd get a lot of problems. And then, a friend told me, like, try this. Like, you got to trust Chinese medicine for this, man. Like, nobody in Asia is gluten sensitive. Everybody eats this if they need to. And sure enough, like it completely fixed it for me. And I started recommending it to my patients and saw the same thing happen over and over again. It's kind of eerie how reliably this can reverse gluten sensitivity for people, sometimes even on a permanent basis. Like they don't have to keep taking it forever. They can go back to eating wheat.
Yeah, just kind of re-messaging that amylase function in the body. So what you had just mentioned the chinchu, right? And then are you having that as a bulk decoction, or
No, we use these herbs in they are considered food grade. You can just buy them and eat them. They tend not to be the best tasting things, which is why and they're strong. They're medicinal foods, so it's something that in the West, when we think of a supplement, we think of a vitamin, a pill that you're going to take and swallow. In Asia, oftentimes supplements are just other foods that are extremely nutrient dense or that have a certain medicinal action. You cook it into your other food. And so in chorus, we're using these in a formula. So you can just go out, you can get these at Asian grocery stores. You can cook them for yourself. You can eat them. You can also take them with other herbs. And many Chinese herbal formulas work this way. They'll have a mix of things that are more gentle and things that are stronger.
Yeah, like a porridge or something with some red and some senchu, maybe some little daksao berries or something. So yummy.
Yeah, they'll add adzuki beans to it, or sometimes, like for postpartum mothers, famously, there's the chicken recipe that you cook with dongguai and astragalus and ginseng and jujube dates and all that kind of stuff. It's extremely nurturing food. Like, not for people who have dampness to take that, but if you've just given birth to a baby, like you're qi and blood deficient, you need to be eating very nutritious stuff, very warm things. So you don't get sick. Those kinds of foods are very healthy in that situation.
So what are your favorite ones in chorus that are a little more on the medicinal, really giving the message to the body of like clearing heat, removing dampness? Like what are Fuling is very damp removing, but what are some of the ones that are like your heroes in the chorus formula that we can kind of geek out on? So fun.
I really like the ones that we call these qi movers. And so qi is just gas in this context. It's mostly nitric oxide, hydrogen sulfide. Methane is also a gas that's in our digestive system. All these are different forms of qi. And again, to a certain degree, you want to have them. They're normal. You need them to have proper function. When you have overgrowth of bacteria that create these, you can get problems from that. IMO, intestinal methanogen overgrowth, is a specific kind of SIBO. You have hydrogen sulfide SIBO. You have those kinds of things. When people are creating gases and they need to move, they need to go places, or they're going to cause problems, because all of them are inflammatory to one degree or another. And so they are warming. Qi is warming. It's how we keep our body warm, but they are in too much of a dose, or if it's there and it's not, and it doesn't go where it needs to, it can cause inflammation. So we use Qi moving herbs for people who have low gastric motility or low intestinal motility. And these herbs have a function of improving peristalsis. They oftentimes selectively either relax or constrict smooth muscle. So one of the ways that Chinese herbs work that is just wonderful, Western medicine hasn't really caught up to this yet in terms of the way that they develop drugs. They will eventually, but is that we have biphasic regulatory action. So if you use the right plant according to the pattern that you have, like dampness is a pattern, Qi stagnation is a pattern. If you use the right plants for those patterns, it doesn't really matter if you're having too many bowel movements or too few bowel movements, you'll regulate. And so Qi movers can really help with peristaltic activity when there isn't enough of it by selectively relaxing or constricting smooth muscle.
Wow.
Some of the ones that I really like are citrus peel. So any kind of citrus peel is going to have this. Limonene is the compound that has a lot of action on that. And I really love Aucklandia. Aucklandia it helps with intestinal motility, but it does that by helping smooth bile secretion. So a lot of people, especially people who have the really sticky stools, they have restricted bile flow. And sometimes this will come from a fatty liver. Sometimes this will come from having sludge or small stones in the gallbladder that a lot of people will develop stones or sludge at certain points in their life, and they can pass it safely without surgery. Obviously, if the stones are a certain size, they need to have surgery to remove the gallbladder, but that's, a hospital situation. Hopefully no one's going to an herbalist for when that's a necessary treatment. But Aucklandia really helps to increase bile flow. Bile is both in charge. It's one of the things that governs intestinal motility. It's also what we call the master gardener of the microbiome. So bile flow has a lot to do with influencing a harmonious balance between the diverse array of flora that we all have. And Aucklandia does that pretty beautifully.
I am having a brain fart on the Chinese name for Aucklandia right now, and it's driving me nuts.
Wood fragrance.
What was it?
It's called Muxiang. Muxiang.
Muxiang. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It means wood fragrance. Yeah. Yeah. Hoxiang is a great one also, although that's more for dampness. That's patchouli leaves. Anyone who's grown up in the Willamette Valley of Oregon knows that smell from going to the Oregon Country Fair. Hippies use it to mask the BO. In China, it's a culinary spice. And so, you'll find foods that are very cold tend to be cooked with warming spices so that the you can get all the nutrition out of the cold food without harming yourself. So there's a famous recipe for river fish. River fish is, freshwater fish is considered a very cold, cooling food. They'll cook it by wrapping it in patchouli leaves and steam the whole thing. It's delicious. It's fragrant. It's like, it feels like a warm hug on your insides. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Oh, I need to do that. Where do I get patchouli leaves? That sounds amazing. Do they sell?
You can grow them here. I mean, it's really easy plant to grow.
That's amazing.
Oh, I definitely want to do that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I've never heard that story before. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
And then if your water heater breaks and you can't shower, you just rub them all over your body.
Exactly. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, we will definitely link that, because really, really helpful for people to understand what is in what they're taking, why it's in there. And you've done a beautiful job of really explaining that, because I think too many times we just see, take this, and people are just kind of grabbing at straws. And, to be so focused and intentional with your ingredients is really a feat. So much appreciated.
Yeah, we're really trying to help the Americans who eat an American diet and have gut problems. And we find that a lot of people kind of fall into this area of cold and damp.
Yeah.
And when we give, very gentle, warming, drying herbal medicines, they just, people find that the tongue coating, that gross, yucky biofilm tongue coating goes away. They don't feel bloated and tired. The brain fog clears up. Their emotional health improves, and they're able to eat, normal food and not hurt. And
that's the
it seems to
goal.
be working.
Yes,
Amazing.
that's wonderful. Well, was there anything else you wanted to tell us about chorus, or anything you think our listeners would enjoy in terms of just, one thing I had a thought is I know you said humans that are experiencing digestive stuff and also, kind of trying to avoid the overprocessed American diet are good candidates for this particular supplement. But is there like kind of a picture you would, like a symptom picture that you would describe for someone that would be really ideal for this, that would maybe want to search you out and it out further?
So the slogan we like to use is that if you have a thick tongue coating, thick biofilm tongue coating, and digestive problems, like many different kinds, it can be, bowel issues, upper GI, stomach kind of stuff, bile related, bloating. If you have a thick tongue coating and tummy problems, Chorus, which is the product, it'll change your life in 30 days or you get your money back.
Love it.
That's
And
it.
that's any kind of tongue coating, geographic, yellow, thick, in the back, in the front. It doesn't matter. If it's thick somewhere.
Yep. Yeah. Like if it's covering 2/3 of the tongue or more, you can be pretty sure it's going to help you. And it may not be the only thing that you need in life, but it should help you a lot. The other thing that people can watch for is like if they have bloating or if they have any kind of tummy issue, especially, and it feels better even a little bit after a bowel movement, Chorus is likely to help them a lot. If they have pain that's worse after a bowel movement, that's the wrong formula. They should not take Chorus. And if they have, what's called a yin deficient tongue in Chinese medicine, which is like a bright red, like a scarlet tongue with no coating, and it's got all kinds of cracks in it, not the right form. Don't take Chorus. It will not help. It's not right for you.
Yeah, a little too drying, maybe.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people we know we can help. There's also a lot of people we know we can't. We don't want to bother them. We're not here to sell people stuff they don't need. And if they want to learn more, if they want to explore it, if they want to have ask questions or have a conversation with me or my business partner or our associates at the company, we actually have a free online support group people can go to through the platform called School, SKOOL. So it's called the Chorus Circle. And if you guys have show notes, maybe you can.
Yep, we're going to put links.
That's great. Good. I love that story. Oh my gosh, this was so fun. Thank you.
Yeah, this was awesome.
I love being in the Chinese medicine bubble. It's invigorating for me.
It's a fun place to be. There's a lot of, it's a great place to eat dinner with friends.
Yes. I really just have to say, I really loved how you said that Chinese medicine was kind of the original functional medicine. I feel like I've kind of been thinking that, but never really put it into those words. I'm always like, no, what you're describing is so similar to the way that we are trained to think about the body.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like it's so synonymous. We're just using a little bit of a different tool. So I really think that's really special how you mentioned that. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah. When you sleep well, when you have an easy poop every day, when, if you have a uterus and you're in the right stage of life, if your period is not super painful and you don't, have PMDD, like functions, when these functions are all working well, people are happy and healthy, generally speaking. And I feel like what's called functional medicine now is Western medicine and people of a biomedical mindset coming around to really understanding that health is a product of systems of the body functioning the way that we are evolved and adapted to do it.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
If you can promote healthy function, you're helping people. It's not so much that you're fighting disease. There's a time and a place for that, but mostly what we should be doing is promoting health, promoting life. Chinese medicine has been working this way for thousands of years. Yangsheng is what it's called, like life promoting, life birthing practice. But it's not the only one. Ayurveda works this way. Tib works this way. Traditional Islamic medicines. Basically, any medical system that existed prior to the development of microscopes and the ability to use reductionistic scientific method is built by observing empirical phenomenon and the way that different systems interact with each other. And in China they've had a very contiguous culture for 5,000 years of development, and so the medicine, as well as everything else, architecture, cuisine, etc., like it's all developed along that period of time. it's integrating biomedicine now really beautifully, which is how we're able to describe the ways that the microbiome works in conjunction with, talking about 5 elements of traditional Chinese cosmology.
Yeah, that's so fun. I could geek out on that for days. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, no kidding. What a pleasure to have you here. Thank you again. We hope you come back so we can talk about a whole nother topic, because I think there's endless amounts of things we could discuss here today.
All right. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Have a great day. Thank
You
you.
too.